Right, I based a lot of what I'm suggesting today on a huge study that I did. And the study looked at teachers' beliefs, and you can see from some of the excerpts on the screen that a lot of the teachers believe that the reading process in a first language is the same as the reading process in a second language. And while there are some similarities that cross both languages in terms of developing reading, there are many aspects that are quite different in terms of EAL learners. But you can see some of the struggles that some of the mainstream teachers are having. In some respects, the reading literacy needs will be the same, because I suppose it's problems with vocabulary. But as you saw this morning, reading is quite a complex process, and it spans much more than just the development of vocabulary. The other teachers were saying if they're exposed to the word enough, so this magical acquisition metaphor that seems to operate across schools in Scotland, it's probably just the same for native speakers. So in terms of equality, teachers have been, their thoughts and their ideas have been mediated by policy and the fact that everybody can access the mainstream class with equal opportunity, and it tends to permeate how they conceptualize the development of language for EAL pupils. Some of the EAL teachers thought, I haven't really given it massive thought, so you can see they didn't know if there was a difference between first and second languages and the way that reading developed. And then the others say, I learned to read in one language the same way as I learned to read in another. So you can see beliefs impact on the practices that we get involved in. If you have a look at this diagram, I'll just explain it very briefly. This is called the multi-dimensions of reading literacy, and it's developed by Kusser and Silva, and they talk about any practice that we do needs to consider these 4 dimensions. So if we engage in activities and design activities, we need to make sure that we're making demands on all of these different dimensions. So the cognitive level is looking at thinking processes, how to encourage the development of the cognitive skills, the processing strategies that are used. The linguistic and other sign systems is all about the language, the linguistic features of the text, and also when it says other sign systems, it's looking at media text, it's looking at pictures, it can look at objects, so it's looking at text in the broader sense of the word. And all of them communicate meanings, and we learn to think about them in the cognitive domain too. The socio-cultural is the background knowledge, looking at the practices within the social context and the cultural context, and all of those need to be addressed when we develop reading. Otherwise, students don't have the framework of thinking in terms of social and cultural aspects of text. And then developmental is something that carries on throughout their life. As they engage in the development of reading, it changes and they process and they learn and they develop. And all of those work together, and they're not separate dimensions, but they all impact on each other. And I'd recommend buying this book. It's got lots and lots of activities in the back for practicing teachers who are trying to develop EAL. It's a very good one for secondary. Some of the features that she mentioned today about the differences between L1 and L2 reading, and we're going to just look at some of those in terms of activities today. There are differences at various areas and various stages of development. Linguistic and processing differences. If you just have a quick look at that, you'll see that there are different sound systems, different patterns in grammar, different words, different associations that we make with vocabulary. EAL learners process the meaning of words and connect it to different thought processes and different experiences of culture and social meanings through words. Their schematic background for discourse is also different. They don't always see text and process text in the same way that we do. They might have a different structure. It may be looked at differently within their context or their own first language. So the associations that they make with text may be different between the L1 and the L2. Translation was one of the things a lot of the teachers said to me, oh, they just translate and then they get the meaning. But translation is something that processes a lot of memory space in their brain, so when they're dealing with complex sentences, the amount of processing that takes place in the brain, it places a lot of demands on those students, and so those are some of the different features, and it then impacts on memory. The individual and experiential differences, students that are obviously have different individual and cognitive skills. They employ different strategies, and they've got different ways of generating inferencing, and so those differences impact on how they are different to the other students within the class that are monolingual speakers of English, and obviously their world knowledge is different. The wider socio-cultural features, there are different expectations of literacy. They might not engage with text in the same way, and as we look at critical literacy today, not all cultures will engage in a more critical approach to text, because in some cultures it's not allowed, or in some cultures it's done orally but not during reading or in school context. So all of those types of features impact on how students are going to engage with the text that we have. Critical literacy is a branch that extends reading, and it explores the relationship between language and power, and that's what we're going to look at with some of the pictures today. It helps us to look at the taken for granted ways that we have of looking at text, looking at the world, the values and the assumptions that we make about different ideas in the world, different experiences that we have. And so what G looks at it, and also Hilary Jenks, call it reading against the text. So we're not just passively receiving what the text says, but we're reading against it in a more critical way in order to help us interact with it. We will look at how to use Halliday today, so that we can see how the language that is used within the text constructs the reality that is, well, realities in inverted commas. It depends, we all have different realities. So how we're going to look at that today is going to help us consider different linguistic diverse classrooms. It helps us to understand what equality is as we break down tasks and help them to be a little bit more differentiated. I like what Kern calls it. He says when we employ critical literacy with a Hallidayan focus, it helps us to see and provide spaces for learners to be cultural insiders, because a lot of the times they're only attending the mainstream class rather than being participators who are seen as legitimate members of the class. I would suggest reading David Ray. I noticed one of the books on the table. I just thought I'd highlight. He's very good at looking at critical literacy for first and second language development. And he helps you to explore the different aspects of why the writer has used particular language, why these advertisers have chosen this image, because images communicate to us as well, and why have they used a particular layout, why have they used specific lighting, why have they used a particular way of stance, and that helps us to see how language has constructed the world that we live in. And so some of these tasks that we're going to get involved in this afternoon are going to help us to do that. So it helps us to see the purpose and the choices that the writer has made. Right, I just want to ask you a quick question. If you just have a brief read of the comment on the slide or on the screen, and tell me how you think this is possible. Yeah, you know this one? No, but I will get one for you. So if you have something that you're looking at, and anyone who struggles to identify that the surgeon is a woman has obviously had a way of thinking, a way of looking at gender that has been socially constructed in a particular way. So either society operates to construct gender, or how we think of who a surgeon can be. Another example of that is how socially constructed norms. These words here are called markers, woman, male, and female. When you place them in front of another noun, it shows you that we're differentiating these words in order to show you that this is not the norm. And so the way that we use language within our society constructs how we see gender, it constructs how we see race, and as we're going to have a look at today, it helps us to look at marginalized groups. So these markers are examples of helping us to see what is normal. I'm going to give you a set of questions, and what I'd like you to do is just very briefly try to answer questions in each of the boxes. You're going to work in very small groups, so if you're in a big table you can do half and half in terms of grouping, and you're going to try and answer as many of the questions within the boxes as you can. You won't maybe be able to answer them all. There will be some knowledge you're not sure of, but you will be able to answer some of them from drawing from your background knowledge. And I've kind of tried to just construct it with a text that you might not be 100% familiar with, so that you'll get the idea and what experience and what it feels like to be trying to piece together information related to a text. I'm also going to, when you get to this one, I'm going to change over and show you a picture so that you're able to comment.